I love it. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome to our 1:30 Fog Talk. Thank you guys so much for being here on a Sunday afternoon. I am beyond heartened by the valet line that has a 20-minute wait, the line just to park anywhere around here, the people who are here for fog, the numbers I'm seeing, the farmers market, San Francisco's extraordinarily vibrant, busy art scene this week with SF Art Week, with all of the openings and activities I have seen. The energy is palpable. What we are here to talk about today is innovative and different kinds of partnerships that make a lot of things happen in this city. What I want to also acknowledge is, of course, this has been a week of and a season of extraordinary, amazing things to celebrate in our arts community, and really difficult and troublesome and agonizing news within our arts community. So how do we continue to navigate the ups and the downs? Celebrate the possibilities, think about the kind of models that make amazing things happen, the innovative histories of this extraordinary city that have always made amazing things happen. Look to the lessons of the things that are really hard to accept, and think about how we learn from them. What are the problems to solve? What are the incredible opportunities? How do we balance that? Okay, I wanted to start with that. I'm Allie Gass. I should have started with that. I'm the founding director and chief curator of the ICA San Francisco. We're going to talk a little bit about why. Okay, yeah, you can do that. Fair. ICA San Francisco is, as I think many of you know, an institution that was founded out of the pandemic to add to and think about the role that it could play within this extraordinary arts ecosystem, to be a non-collecting arts organization that would bring artists from around the country, around the world, put them in dialogue with Bay Area artists, allow them to kind of push their practice, try new things. It was founded to be nimble, to be always under construction. We've had a really extraordinary 4.5 years of evolution. And most recently, I think you all know, have announced an intentionally nomadic model, and we'll talk a little bit about how we got there and why, which is super exciting for me, and I think for our city, evolving with our evolving city, to activate really interesting and exciting architectural spaces, public spaces, and allow artists to try new things and really weave through the fabric of our city. Okay, that's me. I am joined here with an extraordinary artist and with a really important civic leader. And the reason the three of us, I think, were brought together on this stage is not specifically to talk about exactly just the things kind of we have been able to do together, but to talk about why institutions, artists, and the city are really critical to imagining forward momentum, and for us to talk about partnership models. I want to point to something one of my dear friends and one of our great kind of artistic leaders, Claudia Altman-Segal, recently said when she was asked what might a prediction be for 2026. And she said, I think we're going to have to see institutions and people looking for new collaborations and new models to make things happen. All right, I'm going to stop talking. I could talk for like an hour, you guys. Should I do that?
Just keep going.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop talking. What we're going to do is I'm going to let these guys actually introduce themselves, and then I want to talk very much. I want you to hear what the extraordinary Lily Kwong has brought to San Francisco. I want to hear from Ned about what kind of his purview is, and then my goal is for me to not moderate this, but for us to really have a conversation about this landscape we're in, what our things are that we're hoping we can do, and models we want to see. All right, Lily, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, everybody. I am Lily Kwong. I'm an artist. I create large-scale botanical art with the mission of reconnecting people to ecology and to each other. And I am a Bay Area native. I grew up here in Mill Valley. I went to school at Urban in the city, and this is my first major public art piece with the ICASF in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. And it's just been so thrilling and exciting, and I'm just falling so deeply in love with the Bay Area and working here again. So I'm really grateful to be here.
And to see your art amidst the redwoods.
Woo! Lily. That's good.
At the Transamerica is pretty cool. I'm Ned Segal. Hi, everyone. I'm responsible for housing and economic development in City Hall. I work for the mayor. And like many of you, I grew up here. My wife, Maya, and I are raising 3 kids here. And after spending a whole career in the private sector, I jumped at the opportunity to help out a little bit because, like so many of you, I see a city that has so much more potential than what we're realizing right now. So the mayor had created these 4 roles when he was elected to help sort out the 58 departments that report directly to the mayor. And so in housing and economic development, we have the arts and cultural institutions that happen on city land or with city dollars, the airport, the business-related departments, and everything related to the buildings in San Francisco, permitting and planning and appeals and the rent board and other things that help us make sure that we have a vibrant economy. I talk about the job as we're supposed to revitalize downtown, build more housing, and ensure that we have an economy with a soul.
Okay, Ned, yes, that's really good. And I say pretty regularly that I feel incredibly lucky to be in a city that deeply is prioritizing the arts, or it feels to me is deeply prioritizing the arts as a tentpole for revitalization. Can you talk to me about why the arts are within your portfolio?
It's a great question. You might think when somebody comes from the private sector and they've worked in tech and they've worked in finance, why might you put these departments with them as you're sorting things out? We were really clear that in order to have a vibrant economy with a soul, that we needed to think about the arts and culture community of San Francisco as a part of that economy, that we needed to make sure that we were uplifting that part of our city at the same time as we are thinking about other industries, at the same time as we're thinking about our neighborhoods. Because if we end up with a city that's a bunch of buildings, if we end up with a city that's a bunch of companies, if we end up with a city that's a bunch of workers that go from the homes to the buildings on the buses, but we don't stop to look at the incredible public art, that we don't make sure that we bring the museums and the artists who have been so important to the city with us, and that we are constantly regenerating that community, that all we've created are a bunch of buildings.
Right.
And that's definitely not the goal. We think a lot about how the work that we're doing can be durable. And for it to be durable, we need to bring everybody along with us in a systematic way.
Right, and that's a very complicated and large task, and we'll begin to tease some of that out. I want to let's start from the art, because we do this with our board, we call it the candy. Let's start with the art and talk about what you've done as a little bit of a seed of a model. Obviously, there's very specific kind of private-public partnership that happened to make Lily Kwong's EARTHSEED Dome happen at Redwood Park at Transamerica. Lily, this project actually started with a beginning grant from the Svein Foundation. So I think this is an amazing grant, actually, from Mikkel Svein and the Culture Forward grant. So you were given a relatively small but kind of amazing grant. Tell us about what that initial grant was.
Yeah, so we literally got the seed of this grant that set all of these series of actions into motion, which has now led to EARTHSEED Dome coming to Transamerica Redwood Park. I had come up to the Bay Area in the wake of the fires. I live in LA. Our house was fine, but I decided to stay up here. I came back to Northern California, I just felt so called to be here, and I had the privilege to be able to stay here with my family since last January, and I saw so many people in my community, in the horticultural community, creating ecological infrastructure through community resource. So they were building seed libraries to help people who had lost their gardens and homes regenerate their gardens. And so I wanted to partner with the Altadena Seed Library and create something similar for San Francisco using a series of smaller, intimate seed libraries. But after winning the grant with that proposal and through Lauren Hurst, who works with the ICA, and getting to talk to Allie, this proposal just grew and grew and grew as we realized we had more space, as we realized we had the partnership and collaboration of a majorly important and visionary arts institution, as we realized we had...
Nice, thank you.
That's the ICASF. And then... also, I mean, that's not enough. It was also having the full-hearted excitement, endorsement, and resources of SHFO and the Transamerica building and park itself, and the grounds team and all those resources then took that seed of proposal and turned it into a much more ambitious public art project where our sculpture, EARTHSEED Dome, which you've probably seen the rendering cycling behind me, it's, 25 plus feet wide, 14 feet tall. It will also double as a seed dispersal hub. So over the course of the run, the 7 months, we're aiming to distribute hundreds of thousands of seeds through these seed packets, again, with the Altadena Seed Library. So you can see that that seed of intention is still there, but it's grown through partnership, really.
Yes, and this was this kind of amazing, this is why I wanted to sort of start here, because this was an incredible opportunity that ICA had to be invited by the Transamerica Pyramid Arts Program to activate Redwood Park. We had this incredibly exciting artist with a visionary plan to partner with you've been working in landscape, sculptural practice with earth. This is your first time pioneering 3D printed live soil in partnership with 2 companies.
Yes, very much in partnership with 2 companies. So the 2 teams that I'm working with to bring EARTHSEED Dome to life are Atelio, as well as WASP 3D. So some of my Atelio teammates are in the audience. Hi. But I have been working with earth and landscape for over 10 years, using it as this kind of non-traditional approach of using organic elements as a sculptural kind of medium, but I've never been able to get the level of control that we've been able to do through this 3D printing technique. WASP 3D is the company that's based in Italy that actually makes the robotics and the technology and the machinery that we're using. Atelio's this incredibly innovative design firm that I've connected with through our research and kind of professional relationships, who's really kind of pushing to use 3D printing as a strategy and opportunity to bring more sustainable materials and living materials as an actual public or infrastructure resource to what 3D printing has more traditionally been used to print concrete or plastics. We really wanted to challenge ourselves to use living soil as well as a geomix, which is more limestone and marble, but largely recycled materials. And through these kind of material innovations, we're able to create a very innovative, exciting sculpture that is merging ancestral building techniques of using earth and architecture as well as this very cutting-edge technology. And I just love the tension of that.
Okay, be honest with us. What was hard about doing it in San Francisco? Sometimes we overcomplicate things.
So I was just about to go, and you answer this first, so that I have something to say.
I mean, honestly, this has moved faster than any project I've worked on in my career. I think our first meeting was the beginning of September.
You keep saying that it was in July, but keep going.
Was it?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
All right, we'll have a fight about this
July.
later.
We'll have a fight about it later, but I wasn't here in July. And I know I met you in person. It was in September.
Okay, fine.
Okay, we'll pull up the records. But whether it was July, whether it was September, for example, Madison Square Park, another project of mine, I did a piece called Gardens of Renewal that took shape across 2 lawns in Madison Square Park. There's some images cycling behind me. I worked on that for 2.5 years before we brought that to the public. So, whether it's July or September, it's
still too short
clip. And I think because of that, we opened SF Art Week by starting our printing of the sculpture on that day. And I was quite nervous about that because, you like to have the ta-da moment of like, look at this finished sculpture. That wasn't the case, and it's been the greatest gift to this project to invite the community in, to invite the public into the process. So to go back to your original question, there's actually been an incredible amount of cohesion and collaboration and a commitment to this project that's made it a reality. And if everybody hadn't jumped in head first, we would not be sitting here. It
sounds like alignment is pretty important. You had different stakeholders who all wanted to see this happen, wanted to work together, and there was a lot of history of people working together.
This is deeply an important part of this story. Lily and I speak about this idea of building public art in public. And I think that was a premise to this project that we had to allow to be okay, that we loved this idea that people would watch these bricks printing, and that's part of this. They would invest in some way and return to Redwood Park to then watch the bricks in the dome literally print. And of course, this is a sculpture that evolves so people can come back once it's built and watch it bloom. But Ned, I think what I wanted to sort of chat with you about is there's been a private partnership with, of course, Transamerica investing in the project, allowing ICA to cover their fountain, for us to move quickly, have our architect partner with us, make that, we did have some partnership from the city with allowing those permits to move quickly, which we were incredibly grateful for. We have another project that we also partnered with the Downtown Development Corporation on, which is the large-scale vinyl going up on Bloomingdale's with the artist Jeffrey Gibson. That was another project that we were able to move at a really exciting, quick pace to sort of make something happen in advance of a goal to sort of make the Yerba Buena district feel vibrant in advance of the Super Bowl festivities that are coming, but that feels important. And it will be on for at least a year, so there will be lots of activity around SF MoMA, around MOAD, around Yerba Buena. So an area that we really want to drive an enormous amount of visitorship to also then go into those museums. So there's lots of arts activity happening there, but moving quickly is not always something cities can do well. Do you want to speak to a little bit?
Well, we feel a tremendous sense of urgency today that we need to set a tone that anything is possible here. Right. Our job is to create the conditions and kind of get out of the way so that people can do amazing things in San Francisco. And I think for a while here, people have been timid about even trying to do things here, whether it's build a building or do public art. Right. Because they thought the permit process might be unpredictable. They didn't know exactly how the rules work. They didn't know when they'd have to go to the Planning Commission or the Board of Appeals or the Arts Commission or somewhere else to get permission. And was that permission the ultimate answer, or was there somebody else who might weigh in at some point? And so much of what the mayor and the whole group of us think a lot about is how do we make sure the rules are really clear, make sure it's really easy to follow them. So we've procured new permitting software. It sounds like a really little thing, but if people can go in and click buttons and they don't have to be trained to use it, because it's like going to Amazon to buy something, to apply for a permit for sprinklers or for siding for their home or for something arts related, then people will want to do more of it. So Lily will go tell everybody, it's actually not that hard in San Francisco. And then other people will think that it's possible and will try.
But also so much of preparing for a public art piece of this kind of scale that the museum puts on is thinking about things like sprinklers and pavers and all of those like very technical urban challenges or questions or, need for permits. And I think when that technical and civic skill meets that artistic spirit and innovation, they really sharpen each other and create something really exciting. And it's being able to have those both that...
I spend an enormous amount of my time
Yeah.
thinking about lift permits and sidewalk permits and things like that, and it's such a glamorous job, and I love it. But I want to talk a little bit about, so these are two examples just of my own kind of partnerships that have enabled this model for ICA to happen, right? This new model for ICA is deeply about partnerships. That's what works for us now.
Can we talk about the new model? Because you took something that may have been out of necessity and you're turning it into opportunity, right? You had to leave your space.
Right.
But now you've chosen this totally different model. Can you just talk a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking that, because I think it's actually a really important story. And then we'll talk more broadly about partnerships and possibilities. So ICA was, as I said, certainly founded to explore not just possibilities to kind of augment and deepen the seriousness of contemporary art in San Francisco, but really also to understand that the funding models for contemporary art and nonprofits are really difficult. So we were certainly founded with a board that is incredibly comfortable with the idea of risk, comfortable with the idea of turning left when something's not working, and I'm so grateful to those of you who are in the room. And it's a city of art supporters that are comfortable to some extent with that. So we understood early on that this idea of a permanent home for us, and we do not have a permanent collection. We're not stewarding a collection. We have a very small and nimble staff. So very quickly we understood that paying a lot of rent and managing a building was putting resources somewhere that was going to take away from our ability to do and realize projects like this. So we made that move quickly and excitingly to activate the Cube in downtown San Francisco, and that was a real game changer for us. But we also understood with that move that we were making the decision to be an institution without a permanent home. We sort of didn't understand exactly what that would mean in the long run, but we understood that that was exciting, and we were willing to kind of be an institution that was comfortable to some extent with the unknown, which is very unusual, by the way, in the world of arts institutions. But we could do that, again, because we didn't steward a collection. So being at that corner of California and Montgomery was really, really game-changing for us. That building also, while very grand, had no infrastructure. There was no electrical. There was no HVAC. So we could do these really cool site-specific exhibitions, but it was also challenging. So we kind of did what we could do there, and then knowing it was not forever, we started understanding, hey, if we're going to do really interesting projects for artists, maybe we should be doing them in the spaces that really work for the projects. And so we started getting some inquiries about some public art opportunities, about Transamerica. We were looking for a project that could accommodate a dump truck that you'll be hearing more about, and we had some interest in a pier building. So we evolved into this idea that there are amazing museums, not very traditional museums, but museums that work within a more traditional model that need permanent buildings, that need to be able to sustain those. ICA doesn't need to be that at all. So that was really very much how we came to understand that in this city, at this moment, it just makes so much more sense for us to enter into the space of expanded activations of public spaces, of architectural spaces, of temporary moments of driving people to experience parts of the city that they might not otherwise, or sites in the city that they might not otherwise activate. And that is really how we came to be this.
Well, we can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, lots of things. What I wanted to talk to you about is, what are some partnership models that you guys have begun to see work? And then I want to talk about what we all can see as some of the challenges to those, or where we need to can begin to teach people about resources.
Well, there are so many to come to mind, but I'll mention a couple. Some of you have seen some of the public art, and I see it streaming behind us, right outside of the Ferry Building. There's an example where a foundation came to the city and said, we would like to put art all over San Francisco for people to walk around and see and enjoy, whether they are residents or visitors. And sometimes the city looks at those as a risk. Somebody could get hurt. Somebody has to decide if it's okay or not. Who's going to approve the specific pieces of art? What if there's a message implied in any of that art, and who gets to decide if that is or isn't okay? And when we heard about this, we said, how incredible is it that a family wants to make this happen? How quickly can we really get out of the way and see what happens, recognizing that just like any of the other work that we do, there may be mistakes, but the benefits are far more likely to outweigh the risks, and the ability to inspire other people to raise their hand and say, I'd like to do something incredible in San Francisco too, because they see us open to ideas, whether it's from artists or foundations or from companies or residents, in a way that maybe we haven't shown up in the past. That's the first one that I think of, and it took a few steps along the way where people were afraid to say yes, and not because they didn't want to support the foundation or support the artists, but because they were afraid that it might be their fault if something went wrong. The mayor was great. He said, it'll just be my fault if something goes wrong. And that really unlocks this creativity that otherwise can be hidden behind fear of blame. The second one is the Downtown Development Corp, which you mentioned, is a new group that we helped stand up at the beginning of the Lurie administration, so about a year ago, where we said there isn't a group that can bring together private capital and all these ideas that are on the edges of what the city government's really responsible for, but are so critical to revitalizing downtown. And some people might say, like, why are you talking so much about downtown? Downtown is 40% of the revenue, the tax base for the city. It should be 60%. It's been as high as that much in the past. So when it's 60, not 40, we've got a lot more money to spread out across all of the services that we know are so important to our city. So standing up this group, and I see Bob Fisher, who's on the board of the DDC in the audience here, and forgive me if there are others who I can't see, but a group that can bring private capital to bear, that can then, whether it's cleaning the streets, activating the streets, creating a business fund to stand up small businesses downtown and help them thrive until we can create enough foot traffic for them to be successful. Those are two that I'm really proud of, but the hope isn't that those two are the end of it. It's that they're the beginning, that they inspire others to see what's possible and what we want to help support.
Okay, I think this is really important and great to talk about, because one of the things that I know about public art is, well, I know a couple things about public art, and I want to say public art is incredibly important because it takes sometimes a lot of discomfort to walk into a museum, right? You may not feel like it's for you. You come in and you're like, oh, I understand this. Public art you just happen upon, right? And suddenly it's in the course of your daily life, it can just impact you, shift your perspective, and you discover, oh, art is part of my world. But it can also be hard, and there are a lot of feelings about public art, as we know. And I know that there's been some investigation and work done in San Francisco looking at systems in other cities. I want to turn to you just for a minute and then have some conversations about going back to the DDC and sort of freedom about how public art gets chosen, how we get work done quickly, and then who gets to put art where a little bit. Lily, you're kind of at an interesting moment in your practice, and this is something you and I have begun to really talk about, in that a lot of what you've done early in your career is more partnerships with brands, and you've really sort of made this extraordinary shift into a true and pure, really artistic practice. I think Madison Square Park was a major moment for you. Then EARTHSEED Dome, and this work, there's Madison Square Park right now, which was an amazing project. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to sort of work with corporate funding and a commission versus a public art? And Madison Square Park, for those of you who don't know, is an incredibly important public art program in the heart of Manhattan. But what it is to have sort of a commission from a company to do an artwork. I know you did a beautiful one on the High Line, but that was a different kind of a project, versus a commission from an arts organization to do a major public work.
Sure. I'm really grateful that I started early in my career working with brands, because I I guess I'll back up, which is that I grew up here in the Redwoods, and I grew up in Mill Valley, and I grew up outside. I was building forts. I started my first nature club in first grade. My experience of the natural world was huge, like this cathedral-like energy of the Redwoods. And so when I moved to New York City when I was 18 and I stayed there for 13 years, that was the scale of nature that my body and soul and artistic spirit craved. And I studied urban planning, and I always wanted to work at an urban scale. But when you're in your 20s and you're starting a studio and a business, the Madison Square Park wasn't going to give me a project when I was 25. So, you know, working and collaborating with brands, they had the resources and they had the space to let me explore at the scale that I really wanted to, and I was really energized to do. And the Redwoods for me have always been kind of a totem, like an energetic totem of just that. I mean, I could never, touch the magnificence of the Redwoods, but that feeling of the awesomeness of the natural world has always been kind of like a guiding inspiration for me. So to be able to work with brands, I was able to work at the scale that I wanted to from much earlier on.
If
I'd started a more like traditional arts practice. And I think the main difference is usually with a brand, you have a brief, the kind of parameters of the work are coming from a team, and you as an artist kind of have to back into them. And Madison Square Park and EARTHSEED Dome were both totally emergent from my studio and my studio practice, and that's the privilege for me of making public art.
And then the point I was going to make that actually felt so extraordinary to me about the partnership with the DDC was the invitation to do a major commission with anything really on that Bloomingdale's wall. And I'll say that there are 2 more Bay Area artists, vinyls coming to activate that Yerba Buena district that we have not announced yet. But really it was asked, hey, would ICA be interested in proposing an artistic project for these spaces? And it was complete freedom for me to then call Jeffrey Gibson and say, would you want to return to this project? And it felt really wonderful to me. So one of the things that I would really love to I'm going to pivot us a little bit to some of the challenges that I think everyone in this room understands and any other institutional leader understands, which is and it's not just a San Francisco problem, it's the problem of finding funding to sustain the arts in this city. It's come to me a couple of times this week, the extraordinary wealth that we know lives here in this city, and much of it in big companies, right? So how can we begin, and Ned, you and I have begun to talk about this, to continue to access some of these funds and continue to help pivot them towards the arts?
Well, it seems like there's a generational shift right now where there's some incredible families and foundations who've uplifted the arts for a century.
Correct.
In San Francisco. We're
That's how
fortunate.
The arts have been built, and it's sustained so deeply.
It's also true for the parks.
Yes.
It's also true for the schools. It's true in politics. There have been families and individuals who are strongly identified for their contribution to those entities, those areas of San Francisco. It's an imperative that we continue the shift, that we don't count on the same people all the time, that we broaden it out. It takes time.
It takes time.
One of the things that we talk about a lot with the museums, which are now seeing growth that they have not seen since 5 or 7 years ago.
Yes, let's pause and say that's amazing.
To see how MoMA was able to grow their visitors last year with incredible programming and with clean and safe streets.
Yes.
And with lots of conventions coming back to San Francisco, this flywheel gets going, and we're all in a much better position to raise money for the institutions that are so important to San Francisco when we're doing it from a position of strength. Yeah. And so we think a lot about how we can help the museums grow their audience, and with a couple years of sustainable growth, how they can be raising money from a position of strength, and how we have to use the time in between now and then to really cultivate together the people who want to take the baton from the previous generation. And the previous generation, they could stay with us. There's no reason they have to fully hand it off, but we do need to constantly be regenerating the people who are going to support the institutions that are so important to our city.
And I think it's about continuing to show what all the elements of an incredibly strong arts ecosystem are, right? We need the collecting institutions. We need the galleries. We need the smaller, more locally focused nonprofits. We need art schools where people can have jobs and our creatives can teach. We're going to continue, yes, we're going to continue to, and we need housing where artists can live. None of these problems can be solved overnight. I understand that they are complicated.
They are complicated, but that's not an excuse. That has to just be something that we can tackle. And the way we think about these things, there are some things that we can do that are broadly applicable. We know we have a housing crisis in San Francisco. We built 1,500 units of housing last year. We started to build 700 units of affordable housing. It's unacceptable. A city that is not growing is dying, and our population has not grown for the last 5 years. And we are pricing people out every day. Rents went up 10% year over year last year. We have engineers from tech companies pricing out other engineers from tech companies, let alone people from other parts of our economy. And I don't say that to denigrate engineers, but we have to have room for people to live here. And so the family zoning map and all the work we're doing to make permitting easier, these are foundational things that should help everybody, but they are not enough for the arts and culture community. They're not enough for the educational institutions. They're not enough for the museums. They're not enough for the galleries. And so we have to also think about the industry or sector specific ways that we can make sure that we're continuing to create a community of arts and culture so that, as I was saying at the beginning, that we have an economy with a soul. But we're really just at the beginning of that work.
I agree with that. And I actually think all of these different kinds of projects begin to make the points that there are moments of success, moments of public art that you happen upon, moments of then stepping into the museum that you're right in front of and discovering that there's something there that you love. EARTHSEED Dome that continues to kind of take you back and back and back to this kind of jewel in the heart of San Francisco. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the other innovative models or partnerships that are happening around the city this week. I know there was a panel about Art Plus
Before you go, I'll just say, if you think about Lily's installation right now, it was in the paper earlier this week that somebody's paying $300 a square foot for one of the top floors of the Transamerica building.
I know, it's so good.
And now they're not just walking through these incredible redwoods on their way into the office, but they're walking past, and hopefully stopping to enjoy a local artist's work that is put there by a nomadic institution that is of San Francisco. And so that the people who work in the $300 a square foot office, they're exactly the people who we must inspire to want to be part of the solution, not just to be part of the building that they're going to go up 2 elevators to get to.
I just want to piggyback and say something too, is I grew up here. I went to a school called Urban, which has such an arts focus. So my high school experience of the arts was in the Mission at Presida Eyes and getting, discounted student tickets to the MoMA and Yerba Buena and doing, going to punk shows and learning how to screen print. And it just felt like there was art. I was in high school in the early aughts, and it just felt like there was art everywhere, on the walls. And there was a big culture of passing zines around. And then I also interned at Frankel Gallery. It was like so layered, what you were saying. But I never went into the Transamerica building. I loved the redwoods. I had no idea there was a redwood grove there, because it just felt at the time that it was like that was the business district, and you didn't go in there, and that wasn't for students or young people or artists. And I think this is a huge shift, and this is what's really important to have a healthy, rich, exciting civic arts life, is that, at our opening, there were all kinds of people, and thousands of people coming through, and young people and elders and all sorts of folks. And it's like for Transamerica and SHFO to partner with the ICASF and someone like an artist like me and an artist like Tara Donovan, it brings in a whole different relationship with the city, and it creates a porousness of dialogue where suddenly these engineers and executives and people at SHVO are listening to my ideas around community care and ecological infrastructure and, kind of people as pollinators. And even if it doesn't, they don't action something directly after, inspired by me or Tara, it plants a seed, and that kind of two-way dialogue is what makes it really exciting.
Plants a seed.
We keep doing that. We're like, it was a seed of an idea. And we're like, oh. But I'm really glad you guys said that, because I do think there's something to, yes, I agree with you, like the people who are, at the top of that. But then we also did the SF Art Week kickoff party there on Saturday night, and it was a totally different crowd. And then we'll program continually there. We'll program around Jeffrey and the other artists in Yerba Buena, and we'll partner with the other institutions. All of it is critically important. I wanted to point to a couple of other partnerships. I'm hearing that we have to ask questions, have to turn to you guys and let you guys speak. But, I think there's other things that are civic partnerships. You said to me very rightly, there are many different parts of the city. I know there was a really wonderful panel about Art Plus Water. I'm interested in what is happening with CASA. So many things coming that we can begin to point to that are just innovative models. We're seeing it come out of our institutions as well. This is just the beginning of ways that people are thinking differently, trying to move a little bit more quickly to turn big ships, which is hard to do. Okay. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you.
I feel like Allie could also be a nomadic interviewer if ever needed.
I'm up for it. All right. We're going to turn it to all of you to have a couple of questions. I got a signal. Someone has a mic, I believe.
I'm going to hold it.
Right there.
Hold it. Okay, I'm coming up. Hello, good afternoon. Hi, Allie.
Hi.
I love this nomadic model that you've created, and I'm so excited to see what you do over the next 5 years for the city. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
Lily, I also loved hearing about your collaboration with brands, and I've been having a lot of conversations lately about philanthropy and brand marketing dollars coming together like they never have before in history, and how brands' involvement is a new sort of model for 21st century patronage. And I'm so appreciative of the heritage brands like Gap and the Levi's, but I'm also hopeful that the OpenAIs and the Anthropics and those that are building and creating products that are so far from human-centered experiences, I hope they become embedded into the dialogue in the way that Gap and Levi's are currently. But my question is for you, Ned. I am a lover of the performing arts, and I'm curious if your cohort is thinking about models that incorporate, our world-class institutions of the SF Ballet, the Opera, the Symphony, the SF Philharmonic, to be similar to what Allie is thinking in these nomadic models of bringing performance art to the people to help with their membership and things at their facilities.
Well, a number of the institutions that you mentioned are broadly defined part of the city family, where they're partly funded by the city, they're partly funded by outside boards, and a lot of them happen on city land in the beautiful War Memorial Complex across from City Hall. And those institutions, through having fewer visitors to San Francisco, through some shifts in how some folks are spending their time, they need more demand for their services. They need more people to enjoy their incredible work. And they need it so that we can all enjoy it. They need it so that people can make a living dancing or playing an instrument in one of those companies. And so there are a whole bunch of foundational components that we think about, which is where the work starts, and it's definitely not where the work ends. We need affordable housing for everybody. We need to clean up the streets and make sure that those garbage cans outside of the War Memorial Building are being emptied regularly. And if any of you have seen them overflowing as a show ends, you know that that's not the image that we need to make sure that the people who need help, who are on the sidewalks there as the people are going into the shows and out of the shows, that they're getting the help that they need, that we're standing up shelter beds and enforcing our laws and making it harder and harder sell drugs on our streets and the things that are creating this environment. If we can do all of those things, we will bring more visitors back to San Francisco, and they can help us have more demand for more events for all of those institutions so that people can make a living working as a part of those institutions in a way that it's becoming increasingly challenging today. And that's the work that I think about most around where the city can help and where a role like mine can help for those institutions. And then I hope that a couple years from now, when the attendance at their shows is like this, that we can all stand up and help them with capital campaigns that can make sure that they can be around forever. But I think before we can do that, we have to bring the demand back through all the things that we do that help generate demand. Like, just as a little aside, an example of it is, Moscone Center is almost sold out for next year. Oh. And like, why should you care that Moscone is almost sold out? If they have 40 weeks of conventions, those are people who they didn't choose to come to San Francisco. They came because somebody at their company decided that there was going to be a convention here in San Francisco. But then they come here and see all the incredible things happening here in the arts and culture world and beyond it. Then they go home and tell their family about it. Then they come back for spring break. Then their kids go to school and say, we had a great time. And they come back and they see all the things that are happening in San Francisco. And so a big part of getting the flywheel going for us is getting people back to Moscone, not because conventions are the end all for us, but because tourism's our largest industry, and it's so critical to supporting those institutions that you're talking about.
Thank you. It's great. So important.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you so much. This has been a really informative panel. Ned, my question's for you. And it kind of incorporates a lot of what all of you are doing, art as well as the nomadic aspect for all this commercial vacancy downtown, and incorporating art and using the concept of building where people can see something being built, like the 3D printing. Have you considered doing temporary pop-ups to use that space? Not only would it be positive buzz, but would also attract more eyes to that vacant commercial real estate?
The short answer is yes. And when I got into this job a year ago, I said, can't we just put a whole bunch of art in that incredible space and then just lock the doors at the end of the night and it'll all be fine. Everybody come back in the morning. We don't have to worry about the sprinklers. We don't have to worry about the security and all the. And then I asked one of the museums for a proposal for what it would cost to do something, and it was a couple $1 million.
There's a lot of infrastructure to put art anywhere, and it's not nothing for artists. So I think we all would love to see more art in a lot of these spaces, and I think we're all working towards more, but.
And
sure.
So,
yes.
And don't hear what I'm saying to mean it's just too hard, we're not going to do it.
No, we shall do it.
That just means we have to go find a couple $1 million to make it happen, or we have to figure out how to chip away at that couple $1 million in order to do it. When you think about Powell Street, which is like the main street of our downtown Disneyland for people who come visit San Francisco, there's so much opportunity there. And we could look at it and say, oh, wow, 3 or 4 years from now, maybe there'll be a bunch of retailers who've opened up space there. We have to think about the Super Bowl in 2 weeks, the World Cup in 6 months, all those conventions that I mentioned, and how we get people to enjoy those spaces and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize there's a museum 8 blocks from here, but now I do. I'll walk over there too, or I'll get on the bus and go to Golden Gate Park now that I know more about it. So it's harder than I thought, but we're still running at it.
All good ideas, but I think people are thinking. Thank you. One more.
Thanks so much. Super interesting. Questions for Lily. It's a two-parter. The second part anyone can answer. But I'm curious. I don't know if I heard that the Earth Dome would be permanent, and if it isn't, what are the plans for it after? And then this follow-up question is. What are the lessons learned? If someone wanted to go talk to their city about public art, what can they learn from what you all have done? I'm curious.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, EARTHSEED Dome will be up through the end of July, and then Allie can speak to the plans for. Well, one interesting thing, we could have printed it in place as one continuous piece. And instead, we engineered it so it's being printed 120 geomix blocks that is movable. And we are planning to reinstall it in a permanent home.
ICA San Francisco doesn't sell art. Lily works with galleries. So if anyone here would love to acquire EARTHSEED Dome or potentially a permanent spot in the city, these are all things that I so much hope can happen for EARTHSEED Dome. But it is a movable artwork, which is super amazing. And I think it was really thoughtful of Lily and her team to build it that way. It's an amazing piece that can kind of continue and generate for a long time, which is great. What was the other part of the question?
Lessons learned.
Lessons for doing it in San Francisco.
Lessons learned.
I've done major public art projects throughout my career. I think that the city, other institutions continue to understand what it takes to have the infrastructure to move quickly and partner. There's a lot of desire. I think there are a lot of lessons from other organizations in other cities for us all to look at too. So there's great, I've been talking a lot with New York Public Art Fund, with Creative Time, with Art Production Fund. I'm just looking at New York as well. But, organizations that partner with the city, that bring serious curatorial practice, artistic practice, and just for us to continue to look at what works well to bring really wonderful and serious artistic practice to different parts of cities, and for us to keep thinking about how do we move those permitting processes through quickly, approvals through quickly, how do we partner with other constituencies around our own city to think about where, what, how. There was a good op-ed I thought that was really interesting about a High Line on the Embarcadero Center this morning that I'm going to go walk that now.
Are you an artist?
Yes.
Okay, so my advice as an artist to an artist is the two biggest, most exciting projects I've gotten to work on in the past few years are Madison Square Park and EARTHSEED Dome, and they completely emerged from my studio. My studio plus so much collaboration, but how it started was me mapping out an idea that I wanted to bring to life and then strategically developing a dream list of who are the partners like Atelio, the team that's going to help me fabricate this. And I know my friend Lauren Hurst just got hired by the ICASF. I'm going to call her and see if she can make that introduction. Also, Madison Square Park was the same thing. I just kept walking by that lawn and kept seeing this spiral of native plants. And I think, there's a part of you that hopes your work is going to be so magnificent, Madison Square Park is going to call and say, come present something. But I joined the board of the Sustainability Committee. I sat on the Sustainability Committee for 2 years. I figured out who was the decision makers. I went to those decision makers and said, I've been dreaming of doing a piece at Madison Square Park since I was a landscape design student at New York Botanical Garden. And here's the piece I want to build and why. And we're going to run 20 programs for the community. We're going to create a kids garden because I just had 2 kids and there's not enough space for them to free play. It's only playgrounds. And here's the spiral. And then I went and made friends with all the horticulturalists, got them to give me their 400-page document of all of their research they did during COVID of the native plants to create a really exciting horticultural narrative. And I just think the more I get into this, the more I realize you really fully have to be the engine. And if you're so passionate and then you meet other passionate people who are excited, that momentum builds so quickly. And then suddenly this project that was this big, there's all these spokes and partnerships that I really think of it and have been thinking of it creatively as a dome. I see all these movements and artistic movements, the Bauhaus is a dome, and punk music's a dome, and it's all these nodes working together to create strength and interdependence. But you kind of, I think, as an artist, need to really generate that from yourself first.
One thing that I know we need to do. Is that all you did to make it happen? That's incredible. The one thing that I know the city needs to do is we need a common front door for public art. Because we've got the port, we have Rec Park, we have the schools, there are so many different parts of the city and you shouldn't have to say, what are the rules here and what are the rules there? You should say, I want to do this. and we should be able to spit out the answer for you. And we've got a little work to do before we can get there, but that's certainly the goal.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right, too.
Thank you, everybody. A fascinating conversation. Each comment that you've made could be its own panel, an hour-and-a-half discussion on each one. I want to direct my question to Ned. Thank you for your first year of service with the city. It's not an easy job that you've got. The majority the majority of the conversation is really centered on the incredible work that's happening downtown, private philanthropy's partnership with the city. This is an incredible part of our whole cultural ecosystem in San Francisco, but it isn't everything. And the city has total control over tens of millions of dollars that they don't need to really interact with private entities to oversee. And I guess, Ned, my question is, what are your thoughts about San Francisco not having an overarching citywide cultural strategy right now? And there's a lot of questions that are coming at you and Room 200. And I think the community doesn't feel like there's a lot of answers coming back or really a way to engage in the conversation. I know there were some conversations about the merger, but I think people feel like there wasn't really a conversation.
Thank you for the...
Yeah, and I just want to hearken one...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to hearken one thing that Lily said, which is it's the gift. You said there was a gift of public participation, and I kind of invite you to think about it from that frame.
Thank you. So some of you may be aware, we started a process in the beginning or the middle of last year to bring together 3 arts departments that are part of San Francisco's government: the Film Commission, the Grants for the Arts, and the San Francisco Arts Commission. The idea was not that we want to change their work, we want to be able to do it better. And that if you think about having a common front door for artists, there are 42 grantees that participate in Grants for the Arts and Arts Commission grant-making processes. Maybe it should be way more, but when you have 2 front doors, maybe you don't step through both of them. And so it's a great example of where we hope bringing these departments together will allow us to just serve this community better than we have, with the same or more grant dollars, because hopefully grant dollars come from our hotel tax. We have more people staying here, paying more money to stay in our hotels. We have more money to grant to artists at arts institutions and our cultural centers. So we're midway through that process, and I hope in the next week or so we'll actually get the job description out in the wild. We just hired a search firm, and they're going to help us find the most incredible leader for our new arts department. They may come from the city, they may come from somewhere else, and we'll look to that person to help us bring the whole community along, not to lock themselves in a room and write something and come out and say, I figured it out, but to bring all of you and everybody else along in a process. And I'll acknowledge this is taking longer than I would like for us to get to this point, and I'm sorry. But we still take it really seriously, and we still want it to be done by a group of people that is of this community, not a document that's handed to you. And so hiring that person is a really important step to getting us to that strategy, which you so appropriately point out our city needs.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Wonderful questions. Big, really important topics for our city. Thanks so much to both of you for your generosity and your honesty. I love talking to you guys. We could do this all day, for sure. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.